ever walked into a room and you're totally convinced you left your phone there. But then, boom, it's in your pocket the whole time.
Happens to the best of us.
It's like, what is our brain even doing?
It's a classic example of how our models of reality can play tricks on us. And that's what we're diving into today, those models.
We're cracking open The Structure of Magic, Volume 9.
By Richard Bandler and John Grinder.
These guys, they really get into the nitty-gritty of how these models work.
They gave us a practical framework for understanding how our internal models, how we express them through language. It all shapes our behaviors and how we interact with, well, everyone.
And this isn't just some, like, theoretical mumbo-jumbo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Virginia Satter, she was a huge fan of this book.
Oh, absolutely. Virginia Satter, the renowned family therapist, she saw the book's potential, for understanding communication and how to really drive change.
It's like they cracked the code on how to make real, lasting change happen.
Exactly. Satter recognized that. She saw the book as insightful, about the structure behind impactful transformations, what they called, and I love this, magic.
Okay, so let's unpack this magic then, these models. The authors, they start with this really fascinating experiment using, of all things, playing cards.
Yes. The playing card experiment.
I thought this was such a cool way to explain it.
It is. It's a classic study. They showed people intentionally altered playing cards.
Altered how?
Like, imagine a red 6 of spades.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then they asked people, what do you see?
Okay, so what happened? Did people notice the cards were messed up?
You'd think, right. But here's the thing. Many participants, they just couldn't process it. They saw what they expected to see a normal card.
Because, they've seen a deck of cards before, so they think they know.
Exactly. It's like their brains just filled in the blanks based on what they already knew, based on their expectations.
That's wild. So, like, their brains were straight up lying to them.
In a way, yes. Their brains, which are, honed for survival, filtered out the information that didn't make sense.
So it's a survival thing.
In a way, yeah. Bandler and Grinder call these filters neurological constraints. They're useful. Incredibly useful, in fact, for simplifying the world around us. But sometimes, those constraints, they make us miss crucial details.
It's like when you lose your keys,
Yeah.
You could swear you've looked everywhere, but they're right there in plain sight.
Exactly. And your brain just...
Our brain's like, nope, not there, keep looking.
It's filtering it out because it thinks it knows better. And it's not just our brains doing the filtering. We also have these things called social constraints.
Right, like societal norms. Those unspoken rules we all kind of follow.
Exactly. Think of social constraints as like an extra filter.
Okay, an extra filter on top of our brain's already wonky filter.
Yeah, basically. Things like the language we share, the culture, those norms, they all act on those neurological constraints. They shape our individual models of reality even more.
So it's like everyone's walking around with a slightly different version of reality in their heads.
Yeah, kinda. Based on, their own experiences, where they grew up, all that.
Wow. So we're not just talking about misplacing our keys here.
Yeah.
We're talking about our whole understanding of the world being a little, off kilter.
Exactly. And that's where this metaphor comes in. The prince and the magician. It's in the book.
Oh, yeah. I think I remember that one.
Yeah.
It's about that prince who, didn't believe in certain things.
Exactly. The prince, at first, he just couldn't comprehend that princesses existed or islands.
Seriously.
His reality, his map of reality, it didn't include those.
Wow.
But the magician, through all these orchestrated experiences, he expands the prince's map.
Oh, that's cool.
And that lets him see these things, princesses, islands, that he just thought were totally impossible.
That's such a cool way to think about it. So if we're working with these limited maps, we're missing out on so much. But how do we even know? How do we identify those limitations in our own maps?
Well, Bandler and Grinder, they think language is the key. They believe that language, it's like a map, right? Reflecting the terrain of all our thoughts and beliefs, even assumptions.
So our words can, reveal those hidden areas in our maps? The areas that need expanding.
It's true. And to decode those maps, they break down these 3 key mechanisms our brains use: generalization, deletion, and distortion.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely heard those terms before, but how about a little refresher? How do those actually show up in our lives?
Of course, of course. Well, let's start with generalization. It's how we create these, broader rules, often limiting rules based on specific experiences we've had. Like imagine someone who had a bad experience with a dog when they were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
They might generalize from that one experience, thinking all dogs are dangerous, and that'll limit how they interact with dogs in the future.
Makes sense. It's like one bad apple spoils the whole bunch, but with dogs.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what else we're generalizing about, right?
Right. And then there's dilution, omitting details. We do it all the time without even realizing it. Let's say someone says a work meeting was awful. They're giving us the feeling, but leaving out all the specifics, like who said what, how they
So
reacted.
they're giving us the movie trailer, but not the whole film.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's distortion, where we sort of, I don't know, twist things, manipulate perceptions to fit into those models we've already built. Imagine someone who's convinced they're just not, lovable, and someone gives them a genuine compliment.
Yeah.
Well, they might distort that compliment into pity or not even believe it. It's all to avoid challenging that deep-seated belief.
We see the world not as it is, but as we are. Who said that? It sounds familiar, but it really makes you think.
It's true. And here's where things get really interesting, because generalization, deletion, distortion, this isn't just about our internal world, our experiences. This stuff bleeds into how we talk, how we use language, too.
You're saying our words can actually betray us, revealing all those hidden biases we're carrying around.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of the meta model comes in. Bandler and Grinder, they really hit on something here. Think of it as like a bridge, between what we actually say, the surface structure of our words, and the deep structure, that underlying meaning.
Okay, surface structure versus deep structure. Can you break that down for me?
Sure. The surface structure is like the words themselves, right? What we're actually saying out loud. But the deep structure, that's the meaning underneath, the intention, the emotions driving those words, even if we're not saying them out loud.
So someone could say, I'm fine, but deep down their deep structure is screaming, my world's falling apart.
Exactly. Or someone might be stuck saying, I should go to the gym. I should call my mother. But those shoulds could be masking some serious guilt or obligation underneath.
It's like when people say they can't do something, but it's not that they literally can't. They're choosing not to. Maybe they're scared or they think they're limited. So this meta model thing, how does it help us bridge that gap between what we say and what we really mean?
It's not about mind reading, thankfully. It's about listening closely and asking the right questions to help someone, clarify their own thoughts.
So it's less about interpreting what they're saying and more about giving them the tools to understand themselves.
Yeah. It's like you're handing them a mirror to see these hidden patterns. One tool is challenging nominalizations.
Okay, now you're just using big words. What's a nominalization?
Sorry. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Nominalizations are basically words that sound like things but are actually processes that we've frozen in time.
Processes frozen in time. Now you're really losing me.
Okay, think of the word decision.
Okay, decision.
Sounds pretty solid, right? Like a done deal. But it comes from deciding, which is an ongoing process.
I got it.
Or relationship, failure, communication. All these words, they make these dynamic, changing things seem static, fixed. We lose sight of the action.
Right. Like saying I'm in a state of love instead of recognizing that love's always in motion, always changing.
You got it. A therapist who knows the meta model might ask, what are you deciding? Or how are you communicating? It brings that process back to life. The person remembers they have agency, that things can change.
I like that. So it's not just about analyzing language. It's about empowering people to choose differently.
Exactly. Another key thing is identifying deletions.
Right. Deletions where we leave out details happens all the time.
All the time. Someone might say, I'm afraid, but the object of their fear, gone. A therapist using the meta model might ask, afraid of what specifically? We're filling in that missing information, bringing the full picture into focus.
Like sharpening a blurry image, bringing those details into view.
Yeah.
So by tackling these nominalizations, spotting the deletions, we get closer to that deep structure, to the real deal happening beneath the surface.
You got it. And this clarity, this seeing clearly, it's essential not just for communicating with each other, but for personal growth, too.
Right. Because if we're not aware of these patterns, we're basically on autopilot, right? Just reacting to things instead of choosing how we want to respond.
Exactly. Recognizing these patterns, it helps us connect with our own experiences and with others in a much deeper way. It helps us move past those knee-jerk reactions, those habits that aren't serving us anymore.
It's like we're learning to speak a whole new language, the language of our own minds. But hold on, I'm kind of stuck on this idea of communication. So far, we've mostly talked about words, right? But what about all the other ways we communicate? Body language, dreams, even our senses. They're all telling a story too, aren't they?
Absolutely, you're totally right. We communicate in so many ways, not just with words. And while the meta model mainly focuses on language, those same principles, they can apply to those other ways we represent our experiences.
Like that saying, actions speak louder than words. Sometimes our bodies are saying a whole different thing than what's coming out of our mouths.
Totally. Imagine you ask someone how they are, they say fine, but their shoulders are slumped, they can't make eye contact.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
Seen it a million times. So how do we start deciphering those other maps, those other forms of communication?
Therapists like Virginia Satir, she was brilliant at this, noticing these mismatches. She understood that sometimes our words, our bodies, even our emotions, they're all telling different stories. And she used techniques like enactment, having clients actually act out scenarios to bring those other maps to life.
So they're giving a voice to those unspoken parts of themselves, the parts that haven't been heard.
Exactly. And by bringing those inconsistencies out into the open, we can start to get all those different maps aligned, what we say, what we do, how we feel. That's how we create lasting change, how we start living more authentically.
Wow. This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. We've gone from playing cards to, like, the secret meanings behind our everyday conversations, and now we're talking about how our bodies speak volumes.
It's a lot, but hey, the journey of self-discovery, it's a lifelong thing, right?
It really is. And the more we know about how our minds work, the more we can, design the lives we really want.
Couldn't agree more.
So for our listeners who are like, okay, this is amazing. How do I actually use this in my life? What's the biggest takeaway? Where do we even begin?
Start with awareness. Pay attention to how you're talking, those little generalizations you make, the details you might be skipping over, the ways you might be twisting things. When you catch yourself saying, I can't, stop and ask yourself, is that really true? Or am I just choosing not to?
Love it. We're calling out those self-imposed limitations, pushing past those mental barriers we've unknowingly built.
Exactly. And when you're listening to others, really listen, not just to the words, but to the emotions behind them. Ask clarifying questions instead of assuming you know what they mean.
Less mind reading, more heart hearing. I like that. It sounds like a lot of this comes down to curiosity, being curious about ourselves and others.
Curiosity is key, 100%. And remember, we've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to NLP, so much to explore.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. We've learned how our brains make these models of the world, how those models can limit us, and how we can use language to unlock our true potential.
And I think the biggest takeaway is that we have the power to change those models. It's all within us.
This deep dive has been such a powerful reminder that the magic we often search for in the world, it's already inside us. It's about understanding those map makers in our minds and using that knowledge to navigate life with more awareness, purpose, and being true to ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.